Hi everybody, welcome to Live Blogger. For the last two videos we have been designing this contact us page for our website, and we have already designed the desktop and the mobile version of this contact us page. Now the only thing remaining is the animations and the hover effects. So right now we can see that we don't have any animation or hover effects. If you go to the original design, we can see that when we click on any of these input fields, we can see we have an animation for the placeholders. We can see that it moves up and it also has a different styling. So this is what we're going to do in this video, and we also need to apply some hover effects, like when we hover over the send button we have this hover effect, and also for the social media icons we have this hover effect. So in this video we're going to add this animation and the hover effects. So let's get started. Here we can see on the left side I have the source code of our project, and first of all let's add the hover effects. So let's go to the style.css file, and we will add the hover effect for the form button. So here we will type contact container contact left form button :hover. Now whatever styles we add over here will be applied when we hover over this contact button. We just need to increase the size of the button, so we'll type transform and we'll set the scale to 1.05. Right now let's hover over this, and we can see that we have the size changing. Now we want to have a smooth transition between the normal and the hover states. So here for the form button we will also add one more property, and we will type transition, and we'll set the transition of all the effects to 300 milliseconds. Right now when we hover over this we have the smooth transition between both the states. Let's also add the same effect to our social media icons. So let's scroll down and let's see where are the social media icons. Here are the styles for the icons. So let's copy this and let's paste it over here, and we'll type :hover, and in that we'll type transform scale, and for this we will set a scale of 1.15, and we'll also add a transition for this. So here we'll type transition all to 300 milliseconds. Now for the hover effect to work, we also have to change the display type of the anchor tags. So right now it is set to display of inline, so we have to set the display to inline block. So we'll type display inline block. Right now when we hover over this we have the hover effects. Right now let's add the animation for the placeholders. Now what we're going to do is basically we're going to create a class, and in that we will add some styles for the placeholders, and whenever we are going to focus on any of these input fields we are going to add that class to that label using JavaScript. So first of all let's create the class for the placeholder. So the placeholder is basically the label. So here we'll just copy this selector from here and paste it over here, and here we need to add label.active. You can create any class name over here instead of active, but you have to make sure that you don't have any space between the label and the class name. So the element should be a label, and it also should have the active class applied on it. Now to see the results for testing, we'll just add the active class to one of the labels. So let's go to index.html, and for the first label we'll also add a class of active. Let's go back to style.css, and first of all let's add a background color. We'll set the background color to 023047, and we can see that the styles are being applied for the active label. Now let's set the position. So we'll type transform, and here we can see for the label we have set a transform translate y of 12 pixels. Now we have to move it to the top and a little bit to the left as well. So we'll use transform translate, and in that we can add the x and the y values. For the x we will type -8 pixels, and for the y we will type -16 pixels. So now we can see that it is positioned correctly. Now let's change the color of the text to white, And we'll also add a padding of 4 pixels and 8 pixels. And let's also set a border radius of 8 pixels. And we'll also set the font size to 13 pixels. And now we can see that the styles are exactly as we wanted. Right, so the active class is created. Now let's remove the active class from the first label, and we will add it using JavaScript. So let's remove this from here. And if you go to the bottom, we can see that we have already added the main.js file to our index.html file. So let's go directly to main.js, and we need to access all the form inputs. So for all the form inputs, we have a class called form input. So here we can see for the text area, we have this class form input. Even for the other input fields, we have form input class. So we will store all these form input elements into a constant. So we'll type const form inputs, and we'll set it to document dot query selector all, and in that we'll type dot form input. Now all the form input elements will be stored inside this form inputs constant. Now we have to loop through each of the form inputs, and we have to add event listeners to each of them. So for that we'll be using a for each loop. So we'll type form inputs dot for each, and in that we have to create a callback function, and we'll also create a variable to access each of the individual form inputs. So we'll name it form input, and we'll just create an arrow function over here. Now with this for each loop, we can loop through each of the individual form inputs. So I'll just console.log it, and I'll show you. And I'll just type form input, and let's open the console. And we can see the first input field, the second input field, and also the text area. So we can access each of them using this for each loop. Now we have to tell JavaScript to add the active class to the label of a particular input field. So if you go back to the HTML file, we can see that here in the form element division, we have an input field, and after that we have the label of that input field. And in the same way, we have the input field and label for all the others. So we can tell JavaScript to add the active class to the next element of the current input field. So let's go to the main.js file, and let's remove this line of code, and we'll store the current label into a variable. So we'll just create a variable called this label. Now to access the next element, we have to type the form input, that is the current input, and we have to type next element sibling. So this will get the next element of the current form input into this variable. Now we can add and remove the active classes to this label. So let's type form input dot add event listener. Now we want to add the event listener to the focus event. So we'll type focus, and we'll just create an arrow function over here, and we'll type this label dot class list dot add active. So whenever we click on any of these input fields, the focus event will be triggered, and the label of that input field will have the active class. So let's check it out. We can see that when we click on this, we have this active class applied to this label. It works with all the other input fields. We also have to have a smooth transition between both the states. So let's go back to style.css, and for the label we will add a transition of all to 300 milliseconds. So let's click once more, and we can see that the active classes are being applied. Now the next thing to do is, whenever we click out of the input field, we want the active class to be removed. So for that, let's add one more event listener. We'll type form input dot add event listener, and the other event is called blur. So it will be triggered whenever we click out of the input fields. So we'll type this label dot class list dot remove active, and now let's click on the input field, and we have the active class. And when we click out of this, the active class gets removed. So it is working all right. Now let's add some value over here. So I'll just type John, and now let's click on the next input field, and now we can see that the active class is removed because we added this blur event listener for this. Now when we add the blur event listener, we also have to check whether the input field is empty. If it is empty, then we can remove the active class, but if it is not empty, then we don't have to remove the active class. So here we will add an if condition. So we'll type if form input dot value equals, and we'll set it to empty. So if the form input value is empty, then we need to remove the active class, or else we'll just set it as it is. So now let's test it out and see whether it works. We can see that the active classes are added and removed perfectly. Let's add some value. Just type John, and now we can see that the active class stays there, and we can see that everything is working all right. And whenever we remove any value from here, the active class gets removed. We'll also need to change the font family of the text area. So let's go back to style.css, and here we'll just add font family Roboto sans serif, and now we can see that everything works all right. So that's basically it for this video. I will leave the link of the source code in the description below, and in the next video I will show you how to add this to a Blogger website. So if you have any doubts, you can ask in the comments below, and if you like this video, please click on the like button and subscribe to this channel to get the latest video updates. Thanks a lot for watching. Have a nice day.